Here we go. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no, this is a very soothing slide template, by the way. I was completely relaxed the whole time as I was building out these slides.
We should be playing soft sounds of the water in the background right now.
That's how we're going to make use of our 30 minutes here. But no, look, it's great to be with everyone. We kind of went over a little bit of the background. It's interesting, for me, so after the scientist journey and that I ended up joining this first startup, I ended up joining actually three more startups, in fact, so kind of four over the course of the last 20 years. Three ended up being acquired. One, which I helped start in 2008, was acquired by Salesforce, which Colin mentioned in the YouTube video. And I spent 5 awesome years at Salesforce, seeing how the sales machines were kind of built operationally and culturally at scale. Ended up running small business sales from the Eastern US at Salesforce. It was kind of cool to almost be servicing customers like I was. I'd been a Salesforce customer before and I had all this empathy. But for those of you who know Salesforce, or I'm sure have worked in kind of these like high intensity, and I say that in the best possible way, selling environments, that it's like the end of the month, the end of the quarter. There's never been a better time to buy, right? We're telling our reps, turn over all of the possible opportunities to uncover revenue. And we're doing all these things, which, by the way, are not unethical and they are not categorically ineffective. But the problem that I had was that I would go back to my desk and my phone would ring off the hook, and why? Because I'm a VP at Salesforce and people want to sell me things all the time. And what's happening? I'm not answering the phone because, I don't want to be bombarded with all these pitches, and I'm not responding to LinkedIn. And I had this like little epiphany that, I don't know if I like talking to salespeople very much, right? And this is kind of like a question that plagued me a little bit. Like if you were to ask this question to yourself, do you like talking to salespeople? I mean, I'm sure we're all salespeople here on the call. I would say go ahead and put your thoughts and feedback in the chat, and Colin can help relay that to me. But I'll tell you, I've asked this question to thousands of sales. I can be in a ballroom giving a keynote and to thousands of salespeople, and I say, raise your hand. Who here likes talking to salespeople? Very few hands go up. Now, I know a lot of us have a professional curiosity where we say, hey, look, I like talking to salespeople because I like seeing how they execute the craft. But this idea that if you don't like talking to salespeople, you are actually not alone. There's studies, research, Dan Pink, I'm a big fan of, and To Sell Is Human, talks about this, that when you use the word sales or selling with someone, they had this visceral negative reaction. So I kind of had this little mini epiphany that, I was not necessarily selling the way that I buy. This mantra of sell the way you buy kept repeating in my head. And sell the way you buy, it's not about the buyer's journey and meeting them on the journey. That in my mind, that's a different thing. But when I say sell the way you buy, I was thinking about really two things. Number one, there's this empathetic component, right? Which is, as salespeople, we go out and we execute these tactics. And again, they're not categorically ineffective. They're not unethical. But we just do these things that wouldn't work on us, right? Like I've had reps over the years, they come to me and they say, hey, David, I have this customer. They ghosted on me. I'm trying to reinvigorate the sales cycle. I'm going to send them this note or this follow-up. David, can you read this and let me know what you think? And I would read this thing and I would look back at the rep and I would say, I don't know, if you were the customer, would you respond to this, right? And then the smile comes on their face. And this idea that we almost get to behave differently when we're in sales than we do in normal everyday life. So there's definitely an empathetic component to sell the way you buy, right? Just don't use tactics that wouldn't work on you. But the other piece to this is that we need to be really curious. And this is kind of, as we talk about the transition from science and engineering to sales, we need to be really curious about the pathways and mechanisms by which human beings make purchasing decisions. Because this is really what we need to master if we want to be able to convert customers with passion and conviction in the most ethical and above board and the best possible way. But we don't spend a lot of time thinking about the mechanics of how we make buying decisions. So the question is, if selling the way you buy is really important, well, then how do we buy? And so what I want to do today, I want to do kind of just a couple like little sales science experiments here with you. So just to kind of, drive this point home of like, how is it that we actually buy? So here's my sales science experiment for all of you. I'm going to tell you a bit of a story and then you tell me what you think. Put your feedback in the comments. Now, I know for many of us, I'm here in Toronto, Canada. I saw there were some folks on the YouTube chat from Toronto. So shout out to everyone from Toronto. But, we've all been locked down here for quite some time and the restrictions are just about to start to be lifted. But if you're like me, you are dying to get on a plane and finally go on vacation, once again. So imagine this, right? You are going on your first vacation since the pandemic and you decide that you want to go to Paris, France. Like this is your big thing. You're super excited. And so you put together a budget for how much you're going to spend on your travel. And you calculate that you can probably spend about $800 on your economy class ticket from wherever you are to Paris. And the good news is when you go and you book that flight, you can actually get that flight for $800. So it fits in nicely with your budget. But then actually, and by the way, when you were booking your economy class trip to Paris, you noticed that there was also a first class ticket available. Now, disclaimer, this photo may not be representative of the first class service on your airline, but just hear me out here. So you see that there's a first class ticket, but the first class ticket to Paris is actually quite expensive. It's $5,000, right? Now, you don't have the money to spend $5,000 here, but something magical happens whereby a few days before your flight, you get an email from the airline and they say, great news, Colin. I know you were looking at the first class flight when you were booking your travel, and it was really expensive, but we have a few seats left on the flight. And now if you want to upgrade to this first class ticket, it's not going to be $5,000. It's only $1,200. So now you just need to come up with this extra $400. So the question I have for you, and maybe you can tell me what people are saying in the feed here. Do you spring for this upgrade? Do you spring for this upgrade? Do you somehow figure out where you're going to, and by the way, I'm not here to lead you. Maybe you don't, right? But do you spring for this upgrade? What are people saying there, Colin?
Yeah, chat. Throw a one in chat if you're going for the upgrade. You're going to first class now for only $1,200, or throw a two in chat if you're like, nah, I've made my call. I'm flying economy. I think I hate those offers at the last minute. I'm like, no, you didn't offer this to me in the first place, so I'm done. I don't like I hate being manipulated like that. So I'm like, I won't even use air miles. If a store has like a club card or a this or that, I'm like, nah, I don't do that. But I think looks like I'm the minority because everybody's saying I'm insane, and that they absolutely would for an extra $400. Yeah, it is a long flight. I think I would see, this was what would happen for me is I would go no. And I'd ask my wife and she'd go, you're stupid. And then we would do the upgrade.
Well, you would say no to just to get the revenge at the airline. I'm not letting them get the satisfaction. Then you're like, okay, my wife's making a lot of sense here. But no, you know what? If you're one of these people that are saying, hey, you know what? I would do it. And Colin, let's not discount. What did you just say? You said, well, it is a long flight. What's actually happening here? For those of you who are saying, I'm going to spend this extra $400 that you didn't have, by the way, you didn't have this $400. If I were to ask you, well, great, where are you getting this $400 from? You would tell me a little story. So I want you to think, where do you get this $400 from? Some people say, well, look, I'll max out my credit card. Some people say I'll sell a little bit more at the end of the month. I'll push through an L3 discount just to get, a little bit more commission in. Some people might say, well, look, when I get to Paris, I'm not going to go to all the fancy restaurants I was planning on. I'm just going to, eat fast food. Or better yet, when I come back for the next 6 months, no new clothes for me. You're telling yourself a little story, right? To justify why you're making the spend that you ultimately want. And by the way, for those of you who are saying, you know what? A budget's a budget. I'm sticking to it. You are also telling yourself a story about how fiscally responsible you are. And the take-home message of all of this, right? We're spending money we don't have. We're telling ourselves these little stories. It's this idea that oftentimes in sales, or we think that customers go out and they buy solutions to problems that they have. But the reality is that's not what we do at all. We buy one thing first and foremost, which is feelings. 100% of the time, I will go toe to toe with anyone. We buy feelings 100% of the time. And I'll go kind of full reverse here. I will say that one of the reasons why we know that we buy feelings 100% of the time is because of science. And, I'm going to share this quote here from James Clear in Atomic Habits. Now, in this quote, James doesn't talk about the science behind this, but he says, hey, neurologists have discovered that when our emotions and feelings are impaired, we can't make decisions, right? We have no signal of what to pursue. And in fact, the deeper science is that they look at individuals who have suffered traumatic brain injuries and are no longer able to express feelings. What happens is they are not able to make any decisions. And this leads to this concept of what I refer to the solution fit paradox. And this is what the solution fit paradox means. Think about this. If you're repping a company, right? You're repping a product. If you're a salesperson, you work in a company. When a customer is involved in a sales cycle with you, it ends in one of three ways. They buy your product or service, they buy someone else's product or service, or they build it themselves, like they solve the problem another way, or they do nothing, right? Those are the only three outcomes. So I want you to ask yourself, if you went back into your CRM and you took a look at all of the opportunities that were closed out over the last year, 5 years, whatever it is, and you were to categorize them into those three categories. Now imagine you were an independent auditor. You work for KPMG, you work for Deloitte, and I called you in and I said, I just want you to look at how all these opportunities ended up. And I want you to answer the question, how often, what percentage of the time would you say that the customer ended up making the best decision for them? So when they bought your product, when they bought someone else's product, or they did nothing, how often was that actually the best decision for them? If you want, just put a percentage number in the YouTube chat. Like, how often do people make the best decisions for them? Like, best defined as best ROI and the best the best vendor and the best reputation and the best all things considered. How often? I don't know, Colin. What kind of numbers are coming in here?
Yeah, chat. Throw me. Just give me a percentage. I don't know. Like, are you 10%, 50%, 100%? Good at this? I think if I think about me personally and the decisions I make, I feel like I'd be lucky if I'm 50-50.
Yeah.
And I think we got a bunch of people that roll up to me that are on this, that are probably nodding their heads pretty hard. So if you're a PR team member and you want to take a pot shot at Colin, how frequently are my decisions correct? Nothing higher than 45%, please.
Well, I'll frame this up because we talked about at the outset how sales is life, right? So think about this. If I asked you to write down everything that you ate for lunch in the last month, and then I told you I was going to take that list and I was going to give that list to your doctor, and I was going to ask your doctor, what percentage of the time would you say that Colin, now Colin, you might be a really healthy guy, but I might say, what percentage of the time would you say that the doctor would agree that you ate the best thing for you? Best as defined as calorically, food groups, portion size, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes people want to pick a lower number. Sometimes, people say, are negative numbers okay?
Our team's jumping in with 1%, 2%.
That's right.
Gabby's like 50-50. Gabby's the most generous here.
This is what I refer to as the solution fit paradox, right? People don't do the best thing for them. You don't eat the best things. You don't go on the best vacations. You don't manage your money correctly. You don't marry the best person, objectively speaking, for you, right? We're not in relationships with the best person. How could we know who they, in all fairness to my wife, who I love, we've been married for 19 years, we don't do the best things for us, but we always do what we feel. We always do what we feel. If you said, hey, look, 1% of the time is pretty much how much I, eat the right thing for me, does that mean 99% of the time you were upset with what you ate or what you ordered, right? You get home at the end of a long day and you say, you know what? It was month end, quarter end. I was hustling really hard, trying to sell stuff. You know what I deserve? What do you deserve, Colin? At the end of a long day, what do you deserve?
Sleep. I get young kids, but realistically, like a beer. And if I have a beer, another beer. And then if I have 2 beers, it's like, I might be going to the candy drawer.
Yeah. Or a pizza or a cheeseburger. Like, you fill it in with something that's not good for you, but you don't feel bad about it. You feel good about it, right? This question of like, well, how often do customers make the best decision for them? In their mind, the number is probably pretty high in their mind, right? But objectively speaking, not. And this is where we get into this, like, why do salespeople need to stop selling value? And this is the reason. It's because, and as leaders, we tell our teams this all the time. The reason is because value and return on investment, ROI, are absolutely not the same thing. ROI is an objective financial calculation of an expected rate of return. Value is a subjective feeling. But when we go out and we tell our teams, we say, go sell value, really what we're saying is go sell the return on investment. Go tell the customer that if they spend this money with us, then they will either make more money than that or save more money than that in the long run. You would be stupid not to spend money with us because it's going to come back to you. When we go out and we tell our teams to sell value, really that's what we're saying. We're saying sell the business case. But that's not how people buy. Now here, look, I'm not saying that there's no value in having a business case, right? The way I kind of think of it is that ROI is almost a subset of value, right? And ask yourself this, because I've been in this situation tons of times. You're trying to sell your customer something, and you put together a business case, right? You say, okay, well, if we can automate this process for you, if we can accelerate this process, if we can realize cost savings here, and you kind of put together this case, and you make all these assumptions as far as the data that goes into that. And then you look at the numbers, and if you're like me, have you ever done this? You look at the numbers and you say, you know what? I don't think the customer's not going to believe this. This is too aggressive. This is the payback period. Has this happened to you, Colin? The payback period is too aggressive.
Yeah, you're like, wait, they're already profitable and they haven't even signed yet. I'm going to check my spreadsheet math because I probably screwed something up.
That's right. So now you're like, okay, well, a 3-week payback is unreal. You know what? I would feel better if the payback was like 8 months, 9 months. Like that feels like the right pay. And I say, what the hell is that? Right? Because now the only thing that matters as it relates to that business case, and I would say in general, the only thing that matters as you're putting together a business case for a customer is whether or not they believe that that thing that you said is actually going to happen. And the last time I checked, a belief was a subjective feeling and not an objective statistic. So having a good ROI makes my customer feel good, but don't kid yourself. It's the feeling of that ROI that is really the thing that's moving them to purchase. The same way that if you were in the Gartner Magic Quadrant in the top right-hand corner, if you got all these blue chip customers, if you have all these references, if you got 1 million followers on LinkedIn, what that does is it makes me feel good about doing business with you. Even look, I mean, doing as Salesforce did, Salesforce does so much good in the community in lots of different ways, right? And don't kid yourself. And this is not my insinuation. This is, there's, for example, the Edelman Earn Brand Study, the Trust Barometer. Like these are global studies that they do in these areas. And 2/3 of buyers are now belief-driven buyers. They buy things based on an organization's position on various societal issues, irrespective of the product, right? So at the end of the day, they're buying a feeling. And so you just think, let's talk about it like our personal lives here for a second. I'm not saying this is actually Colin's basement, by the way, everyone.
It's the troll hole. Oh my God.
So I throw this up here to say, what is something that and I'm not asking, maybe Colin, you can answer this if you want. What is something that you spend money on that another person would look at and say, that's ridiculous? Well, I don't understand why they're spending money on that thing. I don't know, Colin, if you have something like that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we've already talked about beer and the amount of beer, but I think genuinely cardboard. I used to collect magic cards, and I've got some that are now worth $100, $200, and it's a tiny piece of cardboard. And I look at it sometimes and I'm like, it's obscene. And then I'm like, well, should I sell that or should I? I'm like, no, I don't want to, because I have it now. It's quite possibly the silliest thing I do.
And yet you do it,
yep.
Right? Like even you objectively, you're like, I don't know why I do this, right? But I still even like the upgrade on the flight to Paris, I could justify that and say, hey, you know what? Like it's 8 hours, it's 5 hours, whatever many hours it is, you're going to be sleeping half the time anyways. You're going to be excited. The food is not going to be as great as you think it is. Why spend that money? Right. But the reason is because it gives you a certain feeling, right? This alignment. And if you think about, again, something you spend money on that another person would look at and say, that's ridaculous. Travel.
I'm curious. Music, I'd like to hear what Chad has to say. What's that thing that you spend money on that's ridiculous? Yeah. Gabby, no, that's not true. She's saying for me, it's healthy food. Get out of here.
No, I'm calling bullshit on that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sebastian's saying Nerf guns. Oh yeah. Nerf guns. No, I do own a bunch of Nerf guns, and I brought them into the office once. I bought them for my brother's bachelor party, and we have 15 Nerf guns. We had a massive Nerf fight at the office. It was fantastic.
And why? Because we value creating that fun environment in the office, or we just needed to cut loose. We value all sorts of different things, right? This is the beauty of us as human beings. And the same thing happens, by the way. If you think, if you're selling it, you ever hear the phrase, no one ever got fired for buying IBM, or no one ever got fired for buying AT&T? Have you heard that before, Colin?
Oh yeah. Nobody ever got fired for buying blue, I think was the saying.
There you go. Right. Yeah. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that IBM has the best products and services, objectively speaking? No, it means that person was worried about getting fired. And so when they buy IBM, they are buying safety and security, right? When you buy into an insurance company, right? Farmers or whoever it is, what are you buying? you're not just buying the insurance, you're buying, setting your life back to normal should something unfortunate happen, right? And so this idea that customers choose vendors that not only align tactically. So certainly if I'm looking for a CRM, you got to have a CRM. If I'm looking for marketing automation, IT security, you got to have that. But after that, and don't kid yourself, there are thousands of vendors that can do what you do, most likely. It becomes this emotional alignment. That's why we talk about building relationships with customers, because relationships are emotional. And in fact, this study, which I talk about in my book as well, this is a study from Harvard Business, The New Science of Customer Emotions, actually looked at 10 specific emotional drivers for how people make purchasing decisions. So for example, when you see like a car commercial on TV, and there's like this young, attractive person throwing their musical instrument into the back of this like little SUV and then driving out to the country where they're meeting another attractive person and going camping, you're like, yes, this is a creative, attractive person exploring the outdoors, living their best life. This is what I want. And the funny thing is, when advertisers advertise to you using these emotional drivers, conversion rates increase. But the best thing and the most interesting thing actually about this idea of the emotional driver is that when I ask you, Colin, like, why do you keep investing in magic cards? Like, why did you buy that Tesla? Like, why did you get married to this person? It's actually very difficult for you to explain, right? Because we are not so in touch with our emotional state such that, and it actually, let me complete the thought. We're not so in touch with our emotional state that we can manifest the reasons why we do things, right? But the reason we do that is because it saves us time. Like, emotions are the quickest way to get to someone and convert them, right? We lead with emotions. This is actually one of the biggest problems that oftentimes in sales, especially in technical sales or IT sales, we're selling software. We tend to lead with the features and functions of the product. We're like, hey, look, we're a platform. Hey, it's David calling from Predictable Revenue. We're a platform, and I don't give a shit about your platform. Okay, like I spend a fraction of a percent of a time caring about what the hell it is that you do, right? I got my own problems that I'm emotionally in touch with, but I can't articulate. So the idea is, if we want to stop selling value, right? What I mean by that is like, stop selling the ROI, stop selling the business case, or at least stop leading with that. Lead with the emotion, lead with the pain, lead with the enemy that your customer is experiencing. So I talk about this, in this particular article. I talk about it in my book, but if you want to go check out the website, I'll give you some links at the end. This is all free and ungated. This article about not confusing value and ROI. I talk about, actually at the beginning of this article here, in the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas, how there's a burger restaurant that has a burger that costs $777. And I asked, like, by all accounts, and they also have a $14 burger at this restaurant. By all accounts, this menu item should not exist, but it does. And people order it. And why? Because if you just hit the jackpot and you're like this high roller, right? And you're thinking about what is the feeling that I'm buying now, like this feeling of being a baller, or this, being a winner. When I spend $700 on a hamburger, I all of a sudden get to feel that feeling of being a winner. When you buy a lottery ticket, spoiler alert, you're not going to win. Okay? What are you buying when you buy that lottery ticket?
You're buying a chance.
Right? You're saying there's a chance, right? I'm buying, and you get you're buying the opportunity to dream and think. And that transaction starts from the time you buy the lottery ticket until they call the numbers, right? Actually, I had a fellow I know who had a big exit from a company. And he says, you know what, David, I'm finally gonna buy myself a Porsche 911. Like, that was the car I always wanted growing up as a kid. And now that I have this money from this exit, I'm gonna do it. I'm like, great. And I'm speaking to him a number of months later. I'm like, hey, did you get the 911? He's like, yeah, I got it. And I'm like, how is it? And he's like, it's okay. I said, what do you mean it's okay? He's like, yeah, like I'm driving around, I'm driving in the city, I can't speed, I'm like talking to my mother on Bluetooth. It's like the same way it was before when I had my, my family SUV. And he said to me, you know what, David, you know what the best part of buying the Porsche 911 was? From the time I ordered it to the time it showed up. Because what did I get in that time? I got this feeling of excitement and enjoyment and just anticipation, right? So value and ROI are not the same thing. So the question I have for you is thinking about who is your ideal customer. If you're listening to this, I want you to think about who your ideal customer is. If you were to close your eyes and I were to say, when you open them, your favorite customer is going to be in front of you, meaning like, what is their demographic? What is their role? What is their, intent and knowledge of your solution or your space? Think about what that person, and then ask yourself, what does that ideal customer value? Meaning when they buy your product or service, what feelings are they buying? And I would implore you to lead with those feelings. And there's lots, I'll give you lots of follow-up stuff if you want to read more, but like lead with those feelings. Do you have a question, Colin?
That's a really good one. I'm curious, chat. When David says, what are the feelings that your customers, that your best customers are getting out of your product? I'd love to hear that. Throw that in chat. What is the feeling? What is that emotion?
Yeah,
that they're feeling?
And look, by the way, if it could be different. It could be different based on the person's role. So look, someone who's in the IT department who's struggling to pull together all sorts of like analytics and insights. If you have a package that helps them do that, it makes their job easier, right? So they're just buying, like ease of use or maybe time, right? Like they're buying freedom to do the things that they want with their family. But let's say, for example, you're selling like IT security software to someone who just had a data breach at their company, right? Now, what does that person value? Well, that person value might, first of all, be keeping their job or keeping their business afloat or the reputational damage that data breach has had, right? So they're buying different things. And the one last thing I'll just kind of leave you with as you think about that is, and I have a YouTube channel called Cerebral Selling, which I'll give you the link. But this is a video I created probably I think this was around the December timeframe of last year. And it was called, keeping up with what your customers value, right? The things that your customers value has changed. And think about even what's happened during the pandemic, okay? So imagine we're in kind of January of 2020. So the pandemic in North America has not set in yet. Now imagine you are buying personal protective equipment for a hospital. What do you value? Okay, there's no pandemic yet. Look, price. Look, the price has got to be, we only have so much money to spend. The price has got to be good. Delivery time frame. Well, look, it's got to get here. And quality. Look, it's got to be good enough, right? Just good enough. Now, boom, you're in the middle of the pandemic. You can't get PPE, right? What do you value? All of a sudden, price doesn't make a difference. I'll pay whatever. I just need it here yesterday. And the quality needs to be top notch. So this question of, as I know a lot of businesses have been affected by the pandemic, but even still during the normal course of business, the things that your customers value will change over time. And if you keep going out, I know many of us, when the pandemic first hit, what you saw were a lot of companies that were scrambling to increase the level of agility of their messaging, right? It was like, oh, we're all in this together. And then it's like the soft piano music. And then the marketing and advertising changed, right? And if you were still like, you were watching some of these brands, some of these commercials, and they were showing commercials that were like 3 weeks out of date as far as like what society valued, they appeared tone deaf, right? So the things that your customers' values have changed. Look, when my primary business, I train sales teams, right? And so when someone invests in sales training, why are they doing that? Well, you'd think if I was focusing on ROI, that they're expecting an increase of a conversion rate of some kind of parameter in their sales funnel. So like, I'm going to help you get better at discovery. You're going to do better at discovery. You're going to get more customers in, and boom, that's going to pay for the training. But also, there could be people, especially in the pandemic, they're working remotely. They're disengaged from work. They don't hear what other people are saying on the phone. They can't spin their chairs around, right? They're leaving companies and they're telling their managers when they leave that like, you never invested in training for us. And I've been sitting at home for a year, captive, without engagement. And don't kid yourself. This is what people are buying. I mean, when you speak at a conference, if I invite you, Colin, to speak at a conference, and I'm a part of the events marketing team, what do I care about? I actually don't really care too much about necessarily what you're going to say. I just want the audience to love it, right? And why? Because I was burned when I hired a $50,000 speaker to speak, and I realized 3 seconds into his talk that this was a horrible mistake. So the next,
you were at that
I was
conference.
there, right?
I'm thinking of a very specific conference. I think Sarah was there too.
I think I may know what you're referring to as well.
I'm not gonna say it live.
We're not gonna get into it. No.
Yeah, for sure.
But so this is it, everyone. So this is why we need to stop selling value. If you're selling value, meaning you're selling emotions and feelings and leading with the enemy and selling empathetically, great, do that. But for many years as sales leaders, we tell our teams to sell value. What we're really doing is we're saying sell the business case, sell the ROI. And of course, that's not what people buy. So if you'd like to learn more, I mean, I give away a ton of stuff for free. I blog at cerebralselling.com, as well as I have a YouTube channel and Instagram feed with the same name. You don't have to sign up if you don't want to. I give away everything for free. If you'd like to learn more, I also have a book, very grateful for. Actually, Mark Roberge, which is going to be coming up, he's a friend. He's a great leader I respect tremendously, was an endorser of the book. It's called Sell the Way You Buy, and you can get it on Amazon or Audible, and it goes into all sorts of detail, tactical detail about messaging, discovery, objection handling tactics related to the concepts that we spoke about. And with that, that's all I got for you today.
Right on, man. That was really great. Questions in chat. Let me see. I know there was a couple here. Sridhar was asking, how do you sell that on that feeling, right? Like, what is that like? Yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, look, so one of the easiest tactics that I teach, and again, I have tons of free content on my site and book about it, to connect with people emotionally, is as you're pitching, if you're asking what's the pitch, is I refer to this tactic of a polarizing statement, which is an emotional statement that, if you're looking kind of for like a very simple formula, is you would use the words love and hate in a sentence to describe what your product or service does. So for example, my third startup, which was acquired by Salesforce, it was a company called Ripple with a Y. And we were a feedback, coaching, and recognition platform. And so what did we do? We didn't go out there at the end and say, oh yeah, we're a feedback, coaching, recognition, and it's coaching and all this awesome stuff. We would say, hey, you know what? We work with leaders like you every day who realize that people love feedback and they hate performance reviews. Right? And the people, and again, if that was your enemy, if you agree that people love feedback, they hate performance reviews, you would lean in and you would say, this is great. Tell me more. What is this, right? Because oftentimes when we think we're pitching, we think we need to communicate. We're a platform that does again, no one cares about your platform yet. People love feedback, they hate performance reviews. Trunk Club, great company in Chicago, was acquired by Nordstrom. What do they say? Well, we're a service for men who love to dress well and hate to shop, right? Cerebral selling, I realize that people love to buy stuff, but you know what they hate to do? Talk to salespeople. And now you're leaning in and you're saying, oh, by the way, you're leaning in if you believe what I believe, right? If you love feedback and hate performance reviews and love to dress well and you hate to shop and you love to buy things but hate talking to salespeople, you're leaning in. But if you don't agree, if you think that you want lots of feedback, but your team actually likes performance reviews, well, then you're going to be pushed away. You're going to be repelled, which I say is good, because the beauty of leading with emotion is that it's self-selecting. People who align with the emotional vibe that you're putting out will want to learn more and lean in and say yes. And those who don't will be like, this is not for me. And I say that's good, because I can tell you, you have a lot of bullshit opportunities sitting out there in your pipeline with customers who have no business being there, that are sapping your productivity, who are destroying your forecast, right? And so I want the customers, and by the way, I have lots of data, from my times as a VP. I've been a VP of sales 4 times, and certainly at Salesforce, the teams that actually had higher degrees of quota attainment were the ones that had the highest amounts of fresh pipeline, not stale pipeline, not deals that have been sitting there for days and days and years, just inflating the pipeline, fresh pipeline. They were relentless. And in fact, shout out to my teams in New York City. My New York City teams always did the best job at that, because they didn't take any bullshit from anyone. They would always be very ruthless about the opportunities that they would go after, and they had the highest degrees of attainment. So this is a great leading with emotion. The love hate is a great tactic. And again, check out the YouTube channel, lots of content on that.
I think my takeaway from this is salespeople from New York are just better than anywhere else.
That's the take-home message.
This is the only thing I heard from this talk. I mean, it's 100% true. I think until I had a decent qualification methodology in place in decent stages, I'd say a lot of my opportunities personally were just total bullshit. And I love the piece that you're talking about in that sort of framework for people that love this but hate this. It's that movie trailer. You can I'm almost feeling that my voice is just a little bit lower when I say that, because it's that you're trying to get that emotional resonance, and I love that.
Well, look, part what you said is absolutely true. One of the challenges that people have, especially young sellers have, is that we go out and we tell them, we arm them with like all of these statements and pitches. And the problem is sometimes you feel when you're given like and God bless product marketing, like when you get like a product marketing pitch or something, you feel like a little gross saying it because it's not words that people use. I'll tell you, if you a quick story. This is a Salesforce story. So this was the sales kickoff that we had. I think this was probably around 2015, 2016. And they hired Aziz Ansari. People know Aziz Ansari, the comedian, to perform. Now, look, I had never heard of Aziz Ansari before. Not that he was in my target demographic or I was his. But look, he was doing sales kickoffs at Salesforce at the time, right? So he gets up there and he's using all this material, right? The stuff that's like about dating in the modern era with the texting and whatnot. And it's not landing because he's talking to a room full of like middle-aged married software people, right? Who didn't even know who he was. So what does he do? He starts picking on people in the audience. Like he kind of transitions, right? And of course, he's sitting in this ballroom of like 1,000 people. He can't see like because the lights are on, can't see everyone. He says, you guys in the front row. He's like, Salesforce.com. Like, what the hell do you guys even do? I don't know. They hired me. They said, come here, tell these jokes. It's not working. Salesforce.com. What do you do? You in the front row, you look important. He doesn't know who anyone is, right? Yeah. So he picks Parker Harris, right? Parker Harris is the co-founder of Salesforce. And he says, like, what do you do? So now everyone's quiet because everyone wants to know what Parker Harris is going to say. And so, it's kind of like in the Old West saloon where like the bad guys come in and everyone's quiet. And so what does Parker Harris say? He says what was on our website at the time, the tagline. He says, well, at Salesforce, we help our customers connect with their customers in all new ways. And everyone's just kind of like waiting to see. And Aziz Ansari erupts in laughter. He's like, what the hell is that? He's like, do your customers know this is like a pyramid scheme or something? Like, what do you mean help our customers all new ways? And everyone starts laughing. And you know why they're laughing? Because that's something that human beings don't say to each other. Like when you get a call from a telemarketer and it's someone who's launching into a pitch, you can tell in 2 seconds. When, you got kids, young kids, I have kids. When my kids come to me and they're about to hit me up for something, I can tell immediately. And why? Because they're almost asking me the question, assuming that I'm going to say no. And I can feel that. And so part of the challenge is when you go out there and you pitch a customer, hopefully if I were to ask, can you tell that I love doing this? I love doing this, right? Hopefully you can tell. If I were to ask you, if I were to see you pitch and do your thing, do you think I can tell whether or not you believe in what you're selling? And if you're forced to use these, pitches and statements that you kind of feel a little gross saying, and you can't manifest with passion and conviction in a natural human way, I, as a customer, will be able to tell. So part of the magic of using tactics like the love hate and a lot of the content that I share is that it should be undetectable and feel very natural for you to execute so customers can get that feeling. Because again, people buy, people describe sales as the conveyance of enthusiasm. Like if you don't believe in what you're selling, they actually talk about this in the book, Talk Like Ted, when you're manifesting, knowledge and insights that you don't believe in, they actually liken it to, and they've done studies on this, to criminals that are lying under interrogation, like people can tell. So being able to do this naturally is very important.
Beautiful. We've got Nick Capozzi coming up, and we're going to be talking about using video in the sales process. So we got a jet. David, thank you so much for coming here. Amazing presentation and hanging out, answering a few extra questions. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Colin. Thanks for inviting me, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of the summit here.